If he had his way, Travis Post would make sure every business leader was trained on fall protection. At least business leaders in residential construction. When a competitive bid can be won or lost over as little as $50, some leaders may choose not to invest in higher cost PPE, such as harness kits to protect their workers from falls, if there's a chance that the added cost impacts their ability to win a bid. As Travis sees it, decisions like that often end very badly for the employee, and even worse for the company in the long term. Because for Travis, his safety department's mission isn't just to make sure the workers on the job are safe, it's to use safety to protect the profit of his company. Here's my conversation with Travis Post, National Director of Safety at PetersenDean Incorporated, one of the largest full-service roofing and solar installation companies in the U.S.
I'm the National Safety Director for PetersenDean, which encompasses solar for roofs for America, fences for America, and some other sideline items that will come on board shortly.
I've noticed that you've been involved in the construction safety and operations field for about 30 years now. What attracted you to this space in the first place?
So in the early 80s, I received my safety baptism, as we call it. I received a skill saw injury to my left knee, which left me as a 3/4 amputee. Took about 2 years of physical therapy to learn how to walk again. At the time, I was young, so I looked into what my next career would be post-construction work and went into the field of respiratory therapy. Did 2 years of school, was actually doing cardiac unit at a major hospital, and received a phone call from my old construction company asking me that they really needed help in the realm of safety. And I said, yeah, sounds interesting. So at that time, I left the field of respiratory, went into construction safety.
So I noticed on your back, and you describe your approach to safety as something called employee-based. What do you mean by that?
So employee-based safety, as I envision it, is more of a hybrid of behavior-based safety and just education, where you have that individual completely buy into the system through education and clear direction. And to sell it to them, they have to buy in 100%. There's no halfway. So it's the employee's responsibility to learn and facilitate the whole safety program.
How do you know when they're 100% bought in?
So what happens is, as you're educating the individuals, it's usually some smirks, some heckling in the crowds, real quiet, lack of participation. When you get that participation of 100%, the employees become active. They bring things to you. They start to get more and more involved in the actual process. And there are certain ways that we do that with getting their input on actual safety equipment, PPE. Because if the employees don't like the PPE that we're mandating, they're not going to use it. If they have input in the whole process, then we get 100% buy-in.
In your background, it looks like your experience spans everything from workers' compensation to accident investigations to OSHA safety training, and as you mentioned earlier, respiratory therapy. Are you just a naturally curious person?
Yes. I tend to try to learn something new every day as much as I can. Yes. And yes and no, I should say. So every aspect of a company needs someone like me. They need someone that's going to question everything. And they also need a person that can communicate and a heavy. And heavy is that stick-carrying supervisor. That's how it all comes together.
The stick-carrying supervisor. That sounds like the fun job.
Nah. And there's actually, we've all had those bosses that it's my way or the highway. And all large companies have to have that aspect in their toolkit. You can't have everybody always communicating and being the nice guys. You actually have to have someone that's stick-carrying supervisor.
Well, speaking of supervisors and leadership, what's something that you teach as part of OSHA 500 outreach training that you wish every business leader knew?
In construction or residential construction, it would definitely be fall protection.
Do you think if they understood that better, that might change some of their business decisions?
Yes. For example, residential construction, there's a lot of competition. And, the bid process, you can lose a project over $50. A harness kit costs well over that, sometimes triple. There's companies that will actually circumvent the safety processes on PPE and fall protection and allow their employees to work without it. And unfortunately, those individuals still get projects even though they're not working safely. It usually ends very badly for the employee and long-term for the company.
I was talking to somebody the other day, and he corrected me because I used the phrase dangerous environment. Is there a difference between a hazardous environment and a dangerous environment?
So a controlled, high hazard environment would be a company that actually provides PPE, puts the employee in the best case scenario to perform their job function safely. The latter is just go do it.
So if that's the case, is there such a thing as an accident?
That's a tricky question. There is and there isn't on both sides of the fence on that one. Accidents are preventable in my book if you actually educate, motivate, and inspect what you expect. There has to be some type of, and the employee needs to actually want to do the safety also. Because in my opinion, if an employer does all the training for fall protection, issues PPE, instructs, retrains, inspects it for what they expect when the employee gets to the site. They also follow up if the employee doesn't do what they're supposed to do. And then on Tuesday, the employee goes out there, leaves his harness in the truck, doesn't follow the training that he's received. That's not an accident if he falls off.
So you're saying that even with all of the training, people are still going to make bad decisions?
Correct.
How do you make sure that doesn't happen, and what should an employer expect?
So what I do is exactly what we talked about earlier, employee-based safety. You have to put it in terms that the employee understands why. Get them to understand why we wear this equipment for their family. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much they made if they're severely injured. They can't continue to utilize that in the future. In so many, we use a lot more direct language in the residential construction industry for communicating that.
I imagine you do. I mentioned earlier that you've got experience or at least training in workers' compensation. So you probably have a good grasp on the impact that has on an employer. So here's just a bold question. If workers' comp is the employer's insurance against costly accidents and potential industries, what's the added benefit for them to continue to invest even more in their safety programs? They've got the insurance.
Correct. So what happens with that is what the insurance companies are in it to make money. So what happens is if you don't participate in an active safety program, it affects your mod rating. So when you have an injury, you send that over to your insurance carrier. Your insurance carrier gives that employee a number, and they start paying bills. The insurance carrier adjuster has no clue who your employee is, what your employee did. They don't care. They just pay bills. It goes through utilization review, and they keep paying bills on that claim to the point to where at the end of the year, they add up all your claims, which then gives you a mod rating. And then the insurance company raises your premiums predicated off of your loss run. If you don't have a safety program and are watching the dimes and nickels, the insurance company really doesn't care. They're just going to raise your rate over and over until you can't pay it no more.
I imagine there's also, if you don't have the safety program, there's probably an impact on productivity or some incremental cost to the business as well.
Exactly. I mean, those hidden costs, and that's kind of what safety does. You can't really look at safety as go out there and be safety cops and catch people not doing what they're supposed to do and make them do it. What my safety department does is we protect profit. That's our sole function. And how we do that is through the safety program, through the workers' comp process, through modified duty.
Is that socialized with the leadership of your company? Do they recognize that that's what safety is all about?
Exactly. So PetersenDean is unique. I've had the privilege to work for two companies that actually take safety this serious. And it's from the CEO all the way down to the employees.
I couldn't help but notice that cost is one of the big value drivers for them in their marketing messaging. And they've set a goal of delivering the most affordable solar installations. What role is safety playing in keeping the costs down to the buyer and helping your company achieve those goals?
So PetersenDean was a high deductible insurance, which meant basically self-insured. So when the company has an injury, we write the check for it. There's no insurance company. So with that, the more injuries you have, obviously that cost line item would go on to the customers and would be an added cost to them. So by having a proactive safety program versus a reactive, it drives that cost code down and therefore not passed on to the customer.
It sounds like then safety is really a part of the business strategy.
And has been for 35 years.
Do you think your safety record is what puts you over the edge from a buyer perspective? Do your customers choose PetersenDean because of that?
Yes, they do. It's an added bonus for them. The sheer size of PetersenDean is also, we capture a lot of market rate. We have a lot of employees, so we can facilitate a faster timeline on the projects.
When did you realize that being in safety or just running the safety program at a company was having an impact on the overall company performance?
So luckily, my first company that received my injury with and also went back to after my injury was actually a family-owned business. So I've kind of got that background also and was lucky enough to learn all the aspects of the business, from employees all the way up to operations side. So that's greatly helped me in the safety side of it because I understand what the guys go through on the operational side.
What's a good day like for you?
No injuries.
How many good days do you have?
Quite a few. So the safety is not difficult. It took me 30 years to learn to make it not difficult. There's a lot of safety people and operations CEOs that make the process difficult, but it doesn't really have to be.
Should a company be evaluating their safety success just by that metric, 0 accidents? Or what other metrics should they be looking at?
So I track on several. We track on violations. We track on recordables. We track first aids. I track participation in trainings. So your data has to encompass everything. It can't just be 0 accidents, because then what happens is people become afraid to actually report injuries.
Have you ever implemented something that you thought was going to be successful and it didn't work out the way you expected?
Absolutely. So I came up with a brilliant idea one time because the framing contractor or framing employees were actually trading out their pneumatic nail gun springs with a very lightweight spring. And we were having a rash of nail gun injuries where the guys were either shooting their foot or their hand with nail guns. Well, they thought it was making it so they can nail faster.
Okay.
Which it did. It nailed their foot to the plywood faster. it nailed their hand to the plywood faster. Yeah, so it worked greatly, but we came up with some great ideas to where we would fix that. We would paint them red. We would modify the employees' tools so that they couldn't do it. They figured out how to circumvent that real fast. It took a whole lot of time painting a bunch of springs that didn't do anything. So that didn't quite work out the way I thought it would. Plus, it upset the guys that were painting their tools.
What did you end up doing then?
So finally, what I did is I started hiring employees that had previously shot their foot or their hand to the plywood to actually do training classes on removing the spring or modifying it. I mean, the guys actually listen to them because they're active employees in the trade. So what we did is we took it one step further too. So an employee that actually injures themselves severely enough and gets modified duty workers' comp payments for temporary disability, we have the injured employee talk to the other employees about their experience in that program. And if anybody's been through workers' comp, you don't get rich off of it. It's basically there to let you. So I have the employees talk to the other employees of their experience.
Do you use your experience as part of your training?
Oh, yeah. Yes, I do. I was that 17-year-old kid that no one could teach.
So what happened? You said there was an accident.
So like I said, I work for a family business, and I was on a job site getting ready to set a beam post. And it was the only thing I had to do on that job, and then I was going to move on to another project. So I didn't feel like taking all my tools out to make this one cut. So I walked up to the lumber yard and asked two employees up there that I knew if I could utilize their tool to make this cut. They thought it would be funny to plug the saw into 220. And the saw they were using, they had wired the trigger on with a piece of baling wire. And the actual guard that covers the blade was also wired. So when I plugged the saw in, it dangled right in front of my left knee until the saw blade grabbed hold of it. And the best way I can explain it is right where the doctor thumps you is where the blade cut through and lacerated my patella tendon. My kneecap was completely cut through. And luckily, the saw blades back then were different manufacturing process than they do now. The new skill saw blades are a thin curved carbide tip blade. If it had been a new blade, I would have lost my leg. I would have amputated it on the job site.
That was not an accident.
No, it was what I consider horseplay.
I don't want to play the way you play.
No. So for years, I've thought about getting a tattoo above my scar. Do it right with skill. Because you know what? If you don't have a sense of humor in this, you won't get very far. I've seen some pretty tragic situations.
It's just so impressive what you've done with your career after an accident like that. You said before that safety isn't difficult, but when you think about the kinds of accidents that can hurt not just the worker, but your business as a whole, whether it's a nail gun accident or a skill saw accident, having that safety program in place is just so critical.
Exactly. So safety protects profit. That's in a nutshell. And that's why you should have a safety program. Injuries happen every day. And if you're not in front of them training your employees, the severity is going to do nothing but go up. So instead of having one employee hurt, you're going to have 3 or 4. Those are direct costs out of profit. You can't forecast them. You can try, but in construction, you're not going to get any jobs if you're forecasting for 10 injuries a month, even 12 injuries a year could cost you a residential construction job. Because right now, in this current market, a subcontractor could be traded out for raising their bid $50 a house.
Those are really slim margins.
Correct. And typically, you're a really good contractor at the end of the year if you make 6 to 8%.
How much would an accident, on average, dip into that percentage of profit?
Okay, without a safety program or someone watching the workers' comp payouts, the average could be $35,000 to $50,000 for just a run-of-the-mill type injury. A major injury, millions. So there's a lot of things that tell you to do the right thing. Safety isn't something that you have to have. It's actually something that you should want to have because of what we've talked about today. Good companies have safety programs. Ones that are here 5 to 10 years and are out of business don't.
And as you said, safety protects profits, which I think comes through loud and clear in the value proposition PetersenDean is able to offer to their customers.
So that's direct profit, which then helps operations get bonuses, be more profitable. So that job site they bid at $100,000, they can bid that job site at $100,000 now, but they're going to capture another 3%.
So you're the hero.
Like I said, this week.
You're only as good as your last accident.
There you go. That's safety.
Got it.
That's our game. But years ago, I went to a company and their mod rating was about 120%. And I was freelancing at the time, and they had just had a death that I was helping them with. And I sat down with the ownership and I said, I'll tell you what, I'll work for free for 6 months. Your insurance renewal is in June. I'll work these 6 months free, but at the end of the 6 months, you give me 10% of whatever I save you. So in June, we sat down, I showed him the number, and he told me I was fired.
He didn't want to pay you the 10%?
It was $850,000.
Oh my, was your 10% or?
That was my 10%.
Oh my goodness.
And he said I conned him. I said, no, I didn't con you. I said, here's the numbers. And his insurance broker showed him the numbers and confirmed it. And he said, he's absolutely right. This is the number. And then that taught me a life lesson. Don't ever do that again.
And that's just a bit of my conversation with Travis Post, National Director of Safety at PetersenDean. What a great sense of humor and practical approach to his field. In his own words, safety isn't something you have to have. It's something you should want to have, because safety protects profits. And good companies have safety programs. Those that don't simply aren't around very long. This is Kathleen Finato from TRUCE Software. Join me again as I talk to safety leaders across a wide range of industries to understand how what drives them in their field is also driving the success of their companies. It's no accident.